Good evening. Welcome to the Watchman Live. This is the Blue Room, and I am Eric Gilbert. I know it's been a bit since my last live stream, and as always, I do appreciate the patience of those of you who do subscribe to the channel. I am actually slowly getting things caught up and wrapped here at home. It's been taking me a little bit longer than I had hoped, but I'm still here. We're still doing this, so I appreciate the faithfulness of those of you who continue to watch. And those of you who catch up with us after these live streams are posted to the channel, welcome to my other platforms as well. That being said, let's just go ahead and jump right into tonight, shall we? I came across something, I don't know, the other day while I was reading. It was the story of a man, a somewhat famous man, a man whose life began with unusual expectation. Long before he was old enough to understand it, people of the village believed he was a very special young man, that he was set apart, chosen, a future that the people of that community quietly watched with curiosity. And as he grew, it became clear there was something different about this young man. He carried unusual strength, the kind of strength that became the talk of the community, the village. Stories followed him, stories of courage, stories of standing when danger moved in. One story told of a very violent beast that had come at him suddenly, and somehow he walked away standing. Another story told of a moment when overwhelming crowds closed in around him, and somehow yet again he stood when others may not have. People admired him. Some even feared him. Many from that village believed that he had exceptional leadership quality. And eventually he became exactly that. A man trusted enough to help carry his people through difficult times. And from the outside, he looked untouchable. He was gifted. He was strong. He was respected. The kind of man who could carry almost anything. But strength can be a dangerous thing when a man slowly begins trusting it more than surrender. And sometimes a man can drift quietly. And over time, that same man began pushing closer to things that he should have stayed away from. Desire, comfort, pride, appetite. The slow belief that what had always carried him would always be there. Until one day, the strength, the confidence, and honestly, the very things he believed made him remarkable were no longer enough and no longer available to him. And this admired man became a broken man. His freedom was gone. His image was gone. And the man who once stood above others now found himself low, weak, dependent, and forgotten. But sometimes God, yes, because everything we do in this space here will at some point be related to God. But yes, sometimes God allows a man to lose the world so that he can find his soul. And in brokenness, that man finally remembered where his strength had always come from. His final act was not polished, it wasn't glorious, and it wasn't easy. But it was surrendered. And maybe that's why his story still matters. Because not every strong man falls because he stops believing. Some simply begin believing that they can walk without God. And this man's name was Samson. And for many, that's all they remember. A strong man, a famous man, a dangerous man, a man who could tear through armies and shake the gates from the earth. Samson was not just a strong man. He was a called man. What does that mean? Long before Samson ever stood in battle, before stories were ever told about him, before people feared his name, his life had already been marked. He entered this world as an answered prayer, a child born under unusual expectation, a blessing that people believed had come from God himself. And before he was even old enough to understand strength or temptation, or the weight of being watched, his life had already been set apart or sanctified. He was raised to live differently. He was raised with boundaries. He was raised under the quiet understanding that his life wasn't meant to serve something, or that his life was meant to serve something bigger than himself. And maybe that's where some men begin struggling. Being given something powerful before fully knowing how to even carry it. You see, Samson was not just raised to be strong. He was raised to be set apart. He was raised to be a Nazirite, a man meant to live under discipline, restraint, and dependence. And in time, a man who would rise to become a judge among his people, which meant that his life was never really meant to belong only to himself. That can be a difficult life all by itself, can't it? As a man, to know that your life isn't your own, that you're meant for something greater. And oftentimes that greatness is hinged on self-sacrifice. And as Samson grew, so did the stories. What first began as quiet expectation slowly became public reputation. There were stories of unusual courage, moments of danger, that danger that should have ended very differently for anyone else, but somehow for him it didn't. A lion that should have taken him didn't. Overwhelming armies of men that should have broken him didn't. And little by little his name became larger than life. People talked about him, feared him, admired him, and in hard times many looked to him as the kind of man who would step forward when others stepped back. He had become very strong. He had become respected and useful, a leader, and even a judge among his people. And from the outside, he looked like the kind of man who would carry almost anything. And maybe that's where another quiet danger begins. Because when a man is reminded long enough how strong he is, he can slowly begin believing that he can't fall. He sort of becomes a subscriber to his own legends. But strength can become dangerous when a man begins trusting it more than the surrender. And Samson did not lose himself in one reckless night, though. He drifted there. At first, it may not have looked like much. A little confidence, a little appetite, a little desire, a little believing that he could move closer to what pleased him without ever being touched by it. He followed what looked good. He followed what felt good. He followed what drew his attention. He tested boundaries and lived near danger. He lived on the edge. And he pushed close to those things that he had been raised to keep a distance from. And maybe that was the deeper danger. Not that he hated God, but that he slowly began living as though his strength would always cover what his surrender no longer was. Believing that he could keep stepping near things that he should have stayed far away from. And maybe that's how some men drift, because they stop believing. But because they also begin believing that they can keep walking without their need for God and the way that they once did. And somewhere along the way, like many weary men, he mistook closeness for safety, comfort for peace, and surrender to the wrong place slowly cost him what strength never warned him about. Because not every fall begins with destruction. Some begin with trust placed in the wrong hands. And Samson, a man once feared by many, slowly became vulnerable in the very places he should have guarded the most. What began as closeness became dependence. What felt like comfort became compromise. And the man who had spent years breaking through enemies never realized his deepest weakness would not come from battle, but from slowly opening himself to what his strength could never protect him from. Little by little, those boundaries got blurred. The caution faded, and the strong man who once carried power began laying pieces of himself down where he should have stood watch. And again, maybe that's where some of the most weary men break. Not in war, but in quiet compromise. Giving trust too quickly, giving peace the wrong definition, laying down what should have stayed guarded. And then the day came when the drift finally demanded a cost. The man who had once feared, trusted, and admired, spoken of like legend, was suddenly exposed to something that strength could not fight. Because some losses do not depend or happen in battle. Some happen when a man slowly realizes that he has been giving away pieces of himself long before the final collapse. And in one painful moment, the boundaries he had lived near finally broke. The discipline he had been raised under was gone. The sacred restraint that had marked his life was now broken. Then came the loss. His strength, his freedom, his sight, his name, and his image. And the mighty man who once stood above others was now led by the hand. The one who had once carried gates now carried chains. The one who had once broken through enemies now moved in very small circles, low, bound, grinding through days that no longer looked anything like the life he once knew. And maybe that's where some men finally see it. Not when life is loud, but when everything has gone quiet. When the strength is gone. When the image is gone. The distractions are gone. And all that remains is the man underneath it all. And maybe that's exactly where Samson finally changed. Not in battle, not in the applause of great crowds, not in the years when people feared his name, but down low, weak, broken, and bound. Because sometimes God allows a man to lose the world so he can find his soul. And somewhere in that silence, the strong man remembered not who people said he was, not what made him feared, not what made him remarkable, but he remembered where his strength had always come from. For the first time in a long time, Samson was no longer standing in confidence, he was standing in dependence. And the man who once trusted in his own strength finally turned back with empty hands. No image left to protect. No reputation left to defend. And no pride left to hold. Just surrender. And in the end, Samson's greatest act was not done in pride, was not done in anger. It was not done to prove that he was still strong. It was done in surrender. And though his life was marked by strength, it may be that his truest strength was found only after brokenness. Because the man who had once lived larger than life finally returned to God, smaller, humbled, and whole in a way that strength had never made him. And maybe that's why Samson still matters, because his story is older than us, but his struggle isn't. You see, not every man is called to lead nations. Not every man is called to stand in battle. Not every man is called to carry something large in the eyes of the world. Not every man is meant to be seen. But I do believe every man carries something. A responsibility, a purpose, a weight, a role to play. A place where life quietly says, somebody needs you to stand here. And for some men, that calling looks like fatherhood. For some, being a husband, a provider, a protector, a servant. A man who simply learns how to stay steady when life does get loud. And maybe that's where the drift begins. Not always in rebellion. Not always in some dramatic collapse. Sometimes it begins when a man slowly forgets what his strength was actually for. A gift becomes pride. Provision becomes pressure. Comfort becomes escape. Attention becomes identity. Strength becomes self-reliance. And just like Samson, a man can begin life with something good in his hands and slowly drift until he no longer remembers why it was ever given. Slowly drift until he forgets why it was ever important or significant. Slowly drift until a man forgets what his purpose was. And see, that's where this story reaches further than Samson. Because it doesn't really matter whether a man's calling feels great or small. Every man carries responsibility. For one man, that may mean leading a home. For another, simply learning how to show up every day with steadiness. For some, it means raising children, protecting peace, providing, serving, loving well, staying present when life gets heavy. For others, it may never look large in the eyes of the world at all. It's quiet work, quiet faithfulness. It's quiet sacrifice. It's quiet consistency. More often than not, it's rarely visible to the world, rarely significant to the world. But whether a man carries much or little, the responsibility is still very real. And drift does not ask how big your calling was. It only asks how far you've slowly moved from it. Because some men don't lose themselves by chasing evil. Some simply get tired, distracted. Some get comfortable or numb. Some get busy. Some are wounded and wounded deeply. Some are very proud or convinced that they can carry life without staying close to God, or quietly begin living life with that "I got this" way of handling everything. That slow belief that I can carry this alone. I can fix this myself. I can hold this together. I can keep moving. I can keep producing. I can keep providing. I can keep functioning, all without staying close to God. And maybe that's how drift often begins. Like Samson, not with hatred for God. He loved God. He was chosen by God. But rather with quiet independence away from God. It starts off unintentional. It's just living every day. And before long, strength becomes pride. The responsibility becomes pressure. It's a lot on a man. Comfort becomes escape. And sometimes survival slowly replaces the surrender. And somewhere in that drift, every man eventually reaches a road where brokenness either humbles him or hardens him. A road where pain either teaches him or traps him. A road where failure either sends him back to God or sends him further away from him. Because not every broken man returns. Some hide. Some harden. Some bury themselves in work, noise. Some find comfort in things or people. Anger, isolation, anything that keeps them from facing what the drift has really cost them. And maybe tonight, that's where some men are. You're still functioning. You're still working. You're still providing. You're still showing up every day. You still smile even when you don't mean it. You're still moving. But inwardly, you're tired. You're drifting, quietly carrying those things that were never meant to be carried alone. And if that's you tonight, I invite you to come back. Before the strength becomes pride, before the comfort becomes the compromise, before drift becomes distance, before that survival becomes the only thing you know how to do, come back. Before the man underneath it all forgets where his strength ever came from. God has never only used just strong men. He has always restored the surrendered ones. And maybe again, that's why Samson still matters. Not because he was strong, but because even after the drift, even after the loss, even after the brokenness, he returned. And maybe some men still can too. But maybe tonight, let this not be your last stand like Samson. You don't have to wait until life has taken everything from you. You don't have to wait until the only prayer left is one whispered from the rubble of self-destruction. You don't have to bargain your way back to God. You don't have to say, "Lord, if you return my strength, I'll go down with the ship." Maybe the better prayer is quieter than that. God, fill me again. Restore what the drift has worn thin. Strengthen what pride has weakened. Wake up what comfort put to sleep. Let your spirit steady me again. Restore me to the purpose that you intended for me. Let me be the man that you wanted me to be, dear Lord. Because some men do not need one final collapse. Some simply need to come back before the drift becomes the destruction. And maybe if you're tired tonight, that road is still open. You still have breath in your lungs. You still have a thought in your head. You still woke up this morning and put your feet on the floor. Every new day is a new opportunity. Every day is that chance to draw closer to the Lord, to regain your place in the purpose that He has given you, to re-strengthen what was weakened, to take the opportunity to look to God every day in prayer and devotion, to look around you at your responsibilities and say, Lord, I thought I was strong. I forgot. It was all you. And I know we can do this again together, but I have to come back, and I need you. Let me rely on your strength. I don't think Samson was a terrible man. I don't think he was a bad man. I think he got easily caught up. That's what I think. And it started early when he realized how strong, how physically strong God had made him. It was easy to show off. And then when people started to notice his great strength and the things he was capable of doing, they began to speak well of him. He began to have notoriety and fame throughout the village, throughout the entire nation. And it felt good. And slowly forgetting his purpose. Isn't that strange? How we can still live inside of the purpose that God designed for us while not realizing what it is we're doing. He became that Nazirite that God intended for him to be. He became the judge that God wanted for him to be. All the while, drifting in his heart and his mind, forgetting his purpose, forgetting where that strength had come from and what it was for. And in the end, when it was all taken from him, when all the crowds were gone, when all the shouts of praise and the applause were gone, when it was just him in the deepest depths of despair, it became once again just him and the Lord. And he looked up. He suddenly remembered what his purpose had been. But we don't have to be like Samson today. We don't have to let the despair draw out these dramatic moments of desperation, these prayers to God that if you'll just save me, Lord, from this moment, I'll go down with the ship like Samson. I'll take out this crowd the way you intended for me to do, and I'll go down with them if you'll just return my strength. We don't have to do that. I feel like there could have been another way. I still believe Samson could have called out to the Lord. I still believe Samson could have lived out his purpose for the Lord. It was his choice to go down with the enemy. We don't have to let that happen. We can take where our heart has drifted and lay it down at the feet of Jesus and simply say, Lord, I'm sorry. I forgot what I was supposed to be doing. I forgot who I was in you. How could I forget? How could I forget where my strength came from? How could I forget the things that you've done for me? The things that you've enabled me to do for my family, for my friends, for my community. How could I forget? Maybe we could be more like David. Restore unto me, Lord, the joy of thy salvation, right? Create in me a clean heart, O Lord, and renew a right spirit within me. Cast me not away from your presence, O Lord. Right? Maybe we can return and bring back what it was that God wanted from us in the first place, and live that purpose with that strength that God intended for us to have in and through him, to be able to manage the everyday. To remember that I don't need to be noticed. I don't need the world to know what God had in mind for me. I don't need the world to praise me for the things that I do, because these are things that God sent for me to do. May we always remember that everything is for the glory of the Lord and for the edification of the body of Christ. May we always remember to serve with a heart of joy. When you notice that you're beginning to drift, look up. I'm headed down the wrong road, Lord. Lead me back. Your word is a lamp unto my feet and a light to my path. Father, take me back. Bring me back to where I'm supposed to be. Let me get back on the right track. You don't have to succumb to your circumstances. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your path. That's all I've got tonight. I know it's a little shorter than usual, but I just wanted to share that with you, and hopefully you enjoyed that. This has been a while since I've been live, so hopefully now that I'm starting to dwindle down the responsibilities that I've kind of put on myself here at home in my own life, we'll get back to doing this a little more regularly, and I thank you for being here with me tonight. Good night. This has been The Watchman Live, and you again are in the Blue Room. So the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you. Have a wonderful evening.